everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Live Stories Podcast. I am your host, David, and I am so excited that you are here today. It has been such a long minute since I put on an episode, and I am so sorry. But you know what? I have been incredibly busy. I wanted to talk to you really quickly about one weekend. For those of you that follow me closely and have followed the show, this is our yearly student conference that the church that I attend hosts, and this year was absolutely one for the books. It had a great group of about 23 students, high school guys, with one of my favorite co-leads, Wade Caps. We had such a great time. The kids just are amazing, and I have never seen such a group of people hungry for Jesus. I am so proud of all these kids, and I just cannot wait to see them grow in their walk with Jesus. Also, if you've noticed, everything looks different. I have literally hit the Control-Alt-Delete button on this podcast and the design and everything. I have redesigned the cover art, I've redesigned the video intros, and I've redesigned all the graphics so it all looks the same. It's all got a cool feel, and the further along this show goes, I just keep getting new ideas and I just cannot hold it in. So who knows? Might be different in just a few months. So roll with it. It's my show. I love doing it. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button. You guys, this helps so much to get these encouraging stories out there. If you're listening to on any of the podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcast, or iHeartRadio, please hit the follow, like, leave me a review. It helps so much. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, share the video. It would mean so much to me. All right, you guys, I have never been more excited for a guest to be on this show. I'm so excited to introduce to you this person. That means so much to me. He's definitely one of my best friends that I've gotten to know within this past year, and I am so grateful that God placed them in my life. It's been such an encouragement to me and just a blessing to me. So, a blessing to our students. He serves in our student ministry at CBC here in San Antonio, and I know these kids look up to him. He's such a passionate person. He loves God, and he has an amazing story. I asked him to be on the show. It was literally the best time I've had. It's actually the very first in-person episode that I've ever done. If you've been following the show for a while, you know it's mostly virtual, kind of like a Zoom type thing, but you know what? He challenged me and I took the challenge. We did our first in-person episode ever. It was so much fun to be in the room with the person having this conversation. We had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and an unexpected guest appearance that you guys will see later on in the show. And I love it. I am all for it, and I'm looking forward to doing more and more shows like this. So without any further ado, please welcome one of my favorite people in all the land, Aidan Price. What's up, Aidan?
What's up, David? How are you?
We recover like the brain goes blank when the record button goes on.
It's true. No, that's very true.
It's like when I was gonna tell you I was in a worship team, and that's one thing my worship leaders say, the vortex.
And you just, oh yeah, no. First time I preached in my entire life, I got a migraine and I was sweating buckets. Like I thought it was through my shirt. I was like, bro, like I'm toast. And then, I mean, the way I know the Spirit is real, it was grace of God. Any words came out and they were maybe barely coherent. Couldn't read my outline because I couldn't see what I had. But 100%. No, I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. Well, Aidan,
hi.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. No, I'm honored, David. Thank you for doing this. I know when David asked me, we literally was talking about this before. He was like, I didn't think you were going to say yes. Anything David asks, 100%. He's such a compassionate and sweet leader on and off camera. And so I'm grateful that you're willing to have a conversation with me, man.
Dude, the conversations are always so fulfilling. So
Of course.
And so Aidan, we are here at the ground zero of MTI male residence.
Yeah, we are.
We are not in my little office at home.
This is sad.
Literally the first in-person episode in life podcast history.
Are you for real?
So serious.
I'm honored that I'm the first.
You are the groundbreaking episode.
I didn't realize when you said first, I was thinking like, oh, this might be the first time you've kind of like moved out or done that. I didn't realize this was the first like
in
face to face.
It's always like virtual. I interview people from the last episode I had was from Waco. Even people that are in San Antonio do it on virtual. So I had to go and make it happen.
We need to let's look at the camera. Let's get this framed. This right here. Look at that.
First,
If you're listening along, we smiled and put some thumbs up. So
If you are listening to, yes, on the podcast platforms, so sorry. You should go to YouTube and subscribe.
this will be a good episode to see in person for sure. For sure.
Well, yes, sir. I'm so honored to have you, Aiden. I think meeting you, a little over a year ago.
That's crazy to say, but yeah.
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 And I think we met at Pastor Casey's house.
Yes, sir.
Um, and we sat next to each other and
Mm-hmm.
it was like instant.
Immediately.
Yeah. And man, and then now we served together in high school. Well,
Mm-hmm.
let me take that back. You're now in middle school.
Yes, sir.
But we do have a CG that we meet on Sunday nights, which
Mm-hmm.
is great group of guys and gals. But thank you so much for coming on. I look
Yeah.
up to you, and I think you're such an example. I mean, you said you're such a sweet person, but I think the thing goes back to you.
Mm.
You're such a good example to the kids, to your church family, and to me, and to anybody around you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You
Thank you.
are definitely top 8 in my space world.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Well, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, your story.
Yeah.
Is Aidan Price?
That's a big question right there. Just softball, I see. So yeah, my name's Aidan Price. I help currently right now at Community Bible Church with our youth group. We're gonna take this back. I was born a pastor's kid. So everything I knew in life has always been revolving around church. But even from a young age, I always struggled with my health, especially my physical health. I had tubercular meningitis when I was 3. And so the fact that I'm alive here without any sort of resonating symptoms or current struggles is absolutely a miracle. And as I continued to grow up and continued to walk through life, I had random illnesses here and there. I've had swine flu. I've had a random chronic eye illness. Always the joke in my family is if someone can catch it, Aiden will get it. And
Because you're so tall, you cover so much.
100%. There's so many germs. Actually, though, born short. I was not this height when I was born. Shocker.
Wow.
And lived a good chunk of my life short. So former short kings, I'm here. But as I continue to get older, the things I dealt with, especially physically, I think kind of built up in me this almost reliance on myself, and also there comes a point when you've seen death or when you've faced death, I think enough times, it's not death that scares you, it's the still living. And I know that sounds maybe even kind of like, a little like, cliche sort of, but for me, I stopped caring so much about death, which led a lot of my life to being, okay, if I'm just going to live, if I can die at any time, I'm going to live however I want. And so even though I was raised a pastor's kid and raised in church, Jesus and the gospel was never really something that affected my life or was at the center of my life. Most of my life, I think, was spent trying to find who Aiden is, what Aiden can do, and find value in myself. I think a lot of my relationships, not just with my family, but with others, friendships, girlfriends, were all just seeking to find who is Aiden and who is Aiden to this person. And so I would often just find the people that made me feel the best. And then that was what I attributed as that's really Aiden. And so a lot of my life became so reliant on others' opinions, others' views of me, to the point of when I left high school after dealing with a lot of stuff, a lot of anxiety, depression, had to go on medication. I ended up getting hospitalized for it. Had to quit all the sports I loved. It just really affected my life. That kind of season of life was just really rough. Then after all of this, I go to college. I had a girlfriend at the time. I just wanted to find somebody who would make me feel accepted. After that, I ended up getting to just one of the lowest points of my life. I drove up to the top of a parking garage that we had at campus, and I was gonna jump off, like kill myself. That was my intention. And I had my hands on the concrete, like everything in me is going. And then out of nowhere, I just heard a voice. I can't explain it. And I know it wasn't me because these weren't my thoughts, but it just said tomorrow. Like just like that, just as simple as a voice would just, a calm voice just said tomorrow. And if you were outside watching me, I'm sure you probably thought it was crazy because I start arguing out loud with this voice that I've heard. And so I'm just like, okay, sure, whatever. I get back in my car. I drive all the way down. I'm on autopilot. I'm not thinking. I park. I get up into my dorm. The moment I open the door, I just start breaking down and crying. And my roommate at the time, playing video games, of course, took his headphones off and came over to check on me. He'd been my best friend since 8th grade. And so love him to this day. Jay Steven, I love you, bro. But I was there in
Thanks,
the room.
Steven, for being there.
Yeah. I was there in the room and I just start telling him every sin I could think of, from cheating on a test in 3rd grade to the stuff I was doing actively to the stuff that I was still in the middle of. And at the very end of this long, long rant, he just simply says, "You know, you're forgiven, right?" And he says he could have said a million other things after. But the moment he said that, that was the first time I received grace. I'd heard it, but that was the first time grace permeated my heart. Like it hit me. And I remember that moment of just going, wow, like, yes, Jesus was more than enough. And I think my upbringing and the time that I spent in church and understanding how church world works, how you read your Bible, all of these things, I think it gave me such a jump start into my walk. I'd never realized how many seeds God had been planting the whole time, that the moment that decision was made, it was just like a fire was just lit under me. I spent the next few days reading my Bible. I would go out in the lobby. I was watching every apologetic video I could see. I love Cliff. I love Bryce Crawford later, got into him. But all of these sort of anyone defending their faith, Nabil Qureshi, anybody just diving in, just like, hey, it's okay to be logical and be a Christian. It's okay to have arguments and believe that you're a Christian. Like there is evidence for Jesus. And so I was just on fire. I was in the lobby of my dorm room, completely different person, absolutely like radically changed, completely different. And so then going home, coming back from college, I had no intention of getting into ministry. That was not my heart. And everything
Nobody
in
does.
me, no, for real, everything in me was just, especially as a pastor's kid, you see a lot of negatives to the church. And sometimes the negatives then become all you focus on and you
Yeah.
miss so many of the positives. And so I think my focus was solely on the negatives of church world. And so I came home and I was going to be a lawyer. That was my brain. I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to defend people. I'm going to go into this. I love arguing with people. Let me just do that. So then I come home and my dad, pastor, asked me to come help with our high school boys and just like some of the youth group at the time. And I was like, of course, like why not? I'd love to help you out, Dad. So I just start helping out with our youth group. And I remember the first week kind of going, I didn't say a word, just kind of sat. I was listening and just nothing. Like I didn't say anything. And the more time I kind of spent, the more I got to know these kids, like the more I was so impressed with them. Cause in my brain, from my experience, I just thought everyone had kind of given up on God. Like even the people that I was around weren't Christians, or if they were, they weren't really practicing it. And so I was just very, very, I think, disenfranchised with the church. And I kind of thought, like, man, I know I'm a Christian, but I don't know how many are even out there.
Yeah.
And I remember just hearing these kids talk, and I was so impressed. And during my time in college, when I was down my apologetics rabbit hole, I wrote down 5 questions I thought every Christian should be able to answer. From how do I know the Bible's reliable? How do I know God exists? How do I know that Jesus is God? All of these things. How do I know that He was raised from the dead? And so I remember in the group one day we had been talking and nothing was really said, and we dismissed at 8 and it was 7:58. And so I just asked, I was like, "Hey guys, if you don't believe in God, if you're struggling with your faith, if you're unsure about who you are, any of this, community groups, small groups, time here, the church should be the one place you feel safe to say that."
Yeah.
And so I was like, if anyone has any questions, I'd love to take the time to answer them. 5 hands went up. And every hand, every kid asked one of the 5 questions I said every Christian should be able to answer in college. And so I was like, first of all, I was taken aback. But then after that, I was like, you know what? I can answer those. So then I answered it. Next week, we had a kid share about some abuse that they had dealt with and we're trying to find some healing for. Week after, he brings 3 of his friends, one of whom is an agnostic, has no desire to be here. His friend just invited him. Argued with me the whole time I took him to McDonald's, like the whole time. Did not want to hear a single thing I had to say. Buy him fries. And the first thing he says, oh, like you actually like care. And that to me, those moments, just sparked like the ministry, the heart in me. And
Yeah.
so it got to the point I switched schools. I started talking to my dad, and I was just like, Dad, I have to be in ministry. I can't do anything else with my life. Anything else in my brain would be disobedient. Like I just I'm built for this. I'm meant to do this. And so I told him. He told me no at first, but I think a lot of that was the hurts that we'd seen, which were very real.
Yeah.
But right after that, man, we just like my family, everybody just supported me. My siblings were going to the youth group. I was there all the time, and I just started. I first message, like when I talked about at the beginning of this, first message sweated through my shirt, horrible, like in my brain. I don't even know if anyone remembered anything. My points alone could have been 4 sermon series. Like they were so overly complicated and all of this. But over that season, man, like God he stirred something in me, and he kept showing me time and time again. One, he's not only bigger than I think he is, but he'll do exactly what he's gonna do. And the best part is you're invited into that process. And so for me, after spending so much time running from God, so much time just kind of ignoring him and all of this, now that he's the leader of my life, like, dude, my life, it's not just different, it's like now I am alive. Like before, you have no idea. You're like a walking zombie. No idea how much you're missing out on, and then you finally see it. And it's like, how do you explain to a dead person they're carrying all these things? And now that I'm here, now that I'm walking in it, man, my worst day as a Christian is nothing compared to it is phenomenal compared to my best day unsaved. And I think since then, my dad, he gave me the link for CBC MTI to apply as a resident. And I remember ignoring it because I was like, I'm gonna stay at this church, all this stuff. For 3 days, he like pestered me about it. I was like, fill it out, fill it out, fill it out. Third day, I filled it out, and they know this, out of spite. I was like, I'm just gonna get this done. Like I'm sending this in, whatever. I send in the application. Within 2 weeks, I've had a call with Cairo, who helps with our MTI
Shout out to
program.
Cairo.
Pastor Hutch, I had a conversation with him, and then I interviewed with Pastor Casey, Pastor Hutch, and Cairo. And within the end of February, like I knew I was in MTI. Like God, by January to February, had done all of that for me, and insane. And then Pastor Caleb, who's now our lead student pastor, sent me a message and asked if I wanted to help as a student intern, and that's how I ended up meeting David. And I remember just saying yes, having no idea. And then little did I know this is where I would end up having spoken to so many students, having the opportunity to care for so many, and all from just little daily choices of God, I'm gonna say yes today. So that's my
Wow.
story in a long
That's amazing.
long little nutshell.
That is amazing. I think there's so many gold nuggets I was picking up. I was trying to remember
No,
some
you're
of the
fine.
stuff
I was going out like
that
long, man.
no, that was perfect. And because you said something that there were little seeds planted, but it took
Mm,
you a minute. And I think
mm,
that's one of the biggest things I think even dealing with my own personal testimony, but working with high school kids and
yeah,
then I talk with kids too also that are not in our CBC group that are just in everyday life. Like
yeah,
there's a kid who comes to my work every day to come say hi, and he is not a Christian, does not go to church, but he comes and says hello to me. We dab it up, like it's
yeah. I
cool.
love it.
um Knowing so many other young people that are not following Christ and then knowing people that are, and so they'll ask like, what do I do? And I think people underestimate the power of prayer.
Mm,
Crazy, right?
mm,
It seems like the simplest thing, but it literally is the most powerful thing. It's gonna be better than all the videos and all the tracks you can give them. I think that kind of just annoys people. I know it did for me when I was walking through my testimony. Specifically remember my mom giving me a CD about this topic that I was going through, and I hated it. It just pushed me even more away. But now, years later, knowing the prayer aspect of that, but dang, like I think people need to understand the power of those seeds that are planted. Sometimes people take longer than others. There are some
yeah.
plants that take longer to grow than others.
I think too, we think we're responsible for the growth, or we
Yeah,
judge ourselves based on if this person receives it or not. First Corinthians chapter 3, Paul planted, Apollos watered, but I God caused the growth. Like that's the whole
yeah,
concept. That's the whole idea is all of us are playing key roles and key parts in this, but you don't always blame the farmer just because
right.
something didn't
Right.
crop up this season. It's just what God has determined and allowed. I think even what you said about prayer, like the fact that we have God's like ear, that's how we see God's hand in our lives. So even just that idea, like prayer is knocking at the door of heaven, and God comes where he's wanted. And so praying
Mm-hmm.
for others and praying simply for the sake of just it's a gift to be able to speak to God. We talked about the Old Testament this last week with our community
Yeah.
group, and people are traveling miles, bringing sacrifices. They've spent time preparing just to atone for sins. And I get to wake up today, close my eyes, and speak directly to God. I don't have to leave my bed
Mm-hmm.
without getting to speak to the creator of the universe.
Yeah.
And I think because that accessibility is so close, we can become complacent with it.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
absolutely right in the power of prayer. We underestimate it. And I know I did for a long time, but it's through some tough seasons that you see not just the power of prayer, but the purpose of prayer. And I think that's what I've been living in is prayer is simply it's simply trying to see the world through God's eyes for however brief a moment you can get it.
Yeah.
And so if you can just learn to pray, I think so many things start to fall into place and so many things get the right perspective on them.
I don't know if I've ever like directly shared with you my story.
Mm,
That's another
It's
time.
another day, another
But
day.
I do want to say
It's
that,
another episode.
well, yeah, there was a long time ago. One of my best friends at the time, or he's still one of my best friends, he was in a worship team, and they were doing night of worship. So he invited us to go, and I remember going, and that was the very first time I ever heard that song, "He Loves Us."
Mm,
Chris Tomlin, I
gorgeous
think,
song.
not Chris Tomlin, David Crowder, I think his name was.
Crowder made that?
I think long time
I
ago.
love me some Crowder.
Yeah, the OG CCM, and I had heard that song, and I remember crying out to God and thinking like, man, like I get you love us, like come in, you're God, you died on the cross, like duh, like. But I was just thinking like, man, out of everything that you've created on Earth, but even like in space, the space is still being created. I feel like it's just ever ending, going, and
Mm,
and I'm like, but the craziest thought was, it's like, but you died for me.
mm,
And during that time, I was starting to walk into the season where I was struggling. And I remember, and you know me, and you will never ever hear me say, "Oh, the Lord spoke to me," and I just heard the Lord. I am just not that person. I'm not. But I can tell you, in this moment, I really felt God speak to me, and He's like, "You're here." But not only you, like your siblings, your cousins, your parents are here because of your grandparents' prayers. That my grandparents pray for you by name and along with your entire family every single day, and it's those prayers that keep you here. Now, sad to say that I took a turn. I mean, I was serving in a youth ministry at that time too, but I was leading worship at another church, and I spiraled down this rabbit hole, crazy. But years later, even into that, I remember going to visit. My grandfather was attending a church. It's like the church I was attending before I came to CBC, and my mother had called me, and I remember my mom calling me. She's like, "Hey, your grandpa's not feeling well. You should go visit him at his church." And I was like, I don't know. But I decided to go. And I walked into this church, and guess what song is playing? He Loves Us, right?
that's beautiful.
Crazy. And I'm looking around. It was a larger church, and I'm like, my God, like this is home. I remember this. And I remember looking over, and I saw my grandparents, the ones that prayed for me.
Mm,
And it was just like a crazy reminder of like, man, no matter how far you go, God's always going to swing back around, circle back and remind you. And it was because my grandparents' prayers. And then now coming out and saying the story for myself and then sharing the story with my family, um, and hearing the prayers our mom prayed. And like, I think if there's mothers out there, never underestimate the power of a praying mother.
mm.
Crazy. Because the gates of hell were rattled to the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. And then there was another point that I wanted to point out with you, what you were saying is like with serving with students, um, whether high school or middle school or youth in general. That comment that you said, man, you actually care about us. And I remember that because at my last church I was serving, and I had taken some students out to Six Flags. And I remember that they told me, you're the only one that actually wants to hang out with us. Like
Mm.
everybody's there, but you want to hang out with us. Like we do things with them. And I think you and I being in student ministry, that's so important because I don't want to say that there are good and bad leaders. I just think there are different kinds of leaders. But there are leaders that serve in our ministry that will show up and then that's all. But then there's other students that will keep in touch, text. I texted a student earlier today and I was like, hey, we missed you at CG. Literally the response was, thank you for missing me. That
Yeah.
was like the
Yeah.
coolest thing ever. What advice can you give to someone, either to like a person who's praying for someone who's going through a struggle, maybe
Yeah.
a kid or even a mother or a brother or a son, and then to specifically a student leader or student pastor, what the difference is in just being a leader to students, but actually shepherding students? I know it's like
Dude, no, those
total
are
part of
phenomenal questions.
polar opposites of each other,
No,
but
phenomenal. I think they'll even tie in together, but I think of this as a former prodigal retired. Um,
retired prodigal. I
I
love
I think
that.
my mom told me she used to have this prayer all the time, which was, God, if he's up to something, let him get caught quick. That was like her prayer. And one, God loves answering that one for me, but I think we often underestimate what God can do in the situation and overestimate what we're going to be able to achieve. And I think in the sense of as a former prodigal and running, realistically there wasn't much my parents were going to be able to do. And sometimes it takes going to eat with the pigs to realize there's nothing to eat there. And I think that was what motivated me and made my faith my own. And I think especially, I can't even imagine as a parent, but as a leader, when I watch and I see these students make these choices, it hurts and it hurts deeply. And I think that hurt, first of all, hold on to that because that's how God feels when you sin. Like
Yeah.
that hurt is you connecting with God's heart. But even more than that, like it was the time I spent running from him that's made the time that I spend running to him all the more powerful because the distance, the difference there, even in my life, of man, I know what it's like to be spiritually hungry. When I listen to God preach that the Sermon on the Mount, and I listen, I don't just hear it, I know it, and I've lived it. I know what it's like to be poor in spirit. I know what it's like to mourn. I know all of these things that I didn't before the running. And I don't ever want to glorify the running, but there's a reason God has given us the free will and the ability to run right now. Because even in the running, he's just a step away. It just takes the turning. It just takes the repentance. And so I think one, no one is ever too far gone. And I think about if I'm any testament to any parents out there or anyone who's just hoping that their brother, their sister, their father, their mother would just turn to God. I can tell you one story in particular. I think of my brother, and we've talked about this story. There's a whole thing with it, but he called me one night, and I was struggling with anxiety and depression still. I had no idea how bad his was on top of this. He was really struggling as well. And so he calls me. I had no idea he was in his car and he was going to drive into a tree. That was his plan. And he calls me and he's asking me like, "Hey, Aiden, like, what do I do, man? Like, I'm hurting. I don't know what to do." And you know what I told him? Me being just a wise, unsaved person, it doesn't get any better. That's what I said to him. It doesn't get any better, and I'm sorry. That's what I said. Josh, my brother, he told me after hearing that, he just knew I was wrong. He couldn't explain it. He just knew I was wrong, and he knew he had to prove me wrong. So ended up just pursuing the Lord like crazy, led Bible studies at his school. His nickname on the football team was Rev because he would pray all the time for everybody. And like that was my brother. And I even tell this story one because I'm as broken as anyone else is. Like I'm not the hero. I'm not the hero at all. I'm part of the villain. Like I'm not on the right side. But God came and restored me and did something through even the rebelling that I never would have expected. Most of my ministry, most of my pleading with students to see the goodness of God doesn't come from the mountain, it came from the valley. And that time spent, that's what it means when it says that nothing will be wasted, that God will use everything for good. It's those moments. You can't even be running from God and still not be used by God. And I think that is the most critical thing to understand with this is from the perspective of a prodigal, you being there means more than you think. And what you say isn't always how you're going to win somebody back.
Yeah.
It was the moments when I was struggling and my dad answered the call. It was the moments when I was struggling and my mom was there for me just to hold me. It was the moments when I was not doing well and my brother just loved me and my sister was just present. It's stuff like that. Your presence matters. And I think just always being there, not using the words like, if you ever, or I'll never love you, or all of these sort of like finalizing statements of it's this or that, or my way or the highway. Not that there aren't boundaries that you should set or rules, even. But the one thing that brought me back home wasn't the rules of God, it was the love of God.
Yeah.
And I think if that's the thing that you can demonstrate as a parent or someone who knows a prodigal, I promise you, you may not know when, but it will happen. They'll come home.
That is so good.
So that would be my response to that question. And then the second one is what would you say? How do you care for a leader? Or even what would you kind of
How,
say there?
as a leader, how do you care? Because there's definitely some
Mhm.
boundaries when with
Yeah.
leaders. Because
Yes.
even in our ministry, some of these kids want to hang out, and you're like, okay, I would love to, but there's certain guidelines that we have to follow, even when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
Um, how, as a leader of students, how do you be present or care for someone at the same time, keeping those boundaries, when or even, I mean, I guess you can answer however you want, but even for students that maybe may not have a an older brother or a
Mhm.
father or a parent that is following Jesus, yet the only guidance they have is from us who are not family, and us keeping that safe, um, that boundary out there.
No, that's a great question. I think you even also highlighted a really good thing and that there are some boundaries
Yeah.
as well, because even though you might be stepping into a spiritual role, you are not their father,
Right.
you're not their brother, you're not these things. And so you have to one have a lot of I think constant prayer but constant wisdom and discernment between those roles as well, because there's a way I would act with my sister and my brother
Yeah.
that I don't get to just act with any student or person that I just see as my brother and sister. So there are some very practical roles, not just to keep you safe, because I think oftentimes it's like, okay, well, we of course we want to keep everyone in ministry as long as they can be in ministry and keep them safe, but it's also for the other person,
Yeah.
because you don't want to just now they've made an emotional investment and tie into you, see you in a role that you weren't meant to fill. And so then if you get ripped from or taken out of that role, now you've hurt a student. And now they're sometimes in a worse place than it was before you were there to even fill in the role. Like you being removed might now add on to another, or there's another father figure who's been taken from me. And so being aware of your actual role to play as a spiritual leader, I think that's absolutely critical. There are some, I think, very general, objective, practical roles. No messaging students at night. No, like you can get into the list and the gambit of, I think, just very general, safe rules to have. But what I would say is, I think, of course, the rules are very important, but there are just some things that you just, I think, might take for granted or don't see how important they are. From the simple thing of, I think, of the story I told earlier, buying a student McDonald's fries
Yeah.
changed the way he saw me as a person because it made him feel like a human. And that wasn't something he'd experienced. I remember the first time I had students, this is another one, of course, having other leaders and all that. But the first time I drove a student, so I cooked them steaks. We had a steak night. And I brought them and all that. It was the first time they'd been out of that side of town ever. They'd never gone out of that area of town. And just that alone. And then spending time and having a nice meal or these sort of things, like there are just some things that you can do for people that might not even seem huge, from opening a door to the amount of people I've told him, man, your smile, just smiling at me today impacted me. And I think we make it these big gestures. Like you don't have to feed the 5,000 to reach the one. And I think that is so critical and so crucial. I think one of the things I've taken personally and I'm trying to get better at, a lot of Jesus' ministry happened at a table, not behind a pulpit.
That's good.
So if you can get really good at setting the table and inviting people to the table, I don't think you'll ever miss or ever not have a stage to preach on. And I think people, the table, for instance, the table is such a beautiful place because it symbolizes not just like communion and fellowship, but family. When you think of people sitting around a table, you think of a family. So the moment you've invited people to sit with you or to eat with you or to break bread or spend time or be in fellowship with you, you've already done something that most people have never experienced. There are some people who have never experienced a peaceful time around a table. And if you can make that space safe, if you can be safe for people, I think that's the core of ministry. You can't do any ministry without safety first, which I know that sounds cliche even, but it's true. If people aren't safe first, it doesn't matter how great you can speak or how great you can shepherd or lead somebody. If you can't make a safe space, people aren't going to want to be near you or
That's so
in
true.
that space. And so, valuing people's safety and valuing them as people, seeing them as people, not just as missional objects, I think is absolutely critical to
Wow.
leading.
That's really good. I've never thought about that, of seeing people as missional objects, like a
Mhm.
project. And I think
Yeah,
it's more than that. Um, Man, that's amazing. That's really good. That's really good. I mean, I would just say even just serving with you and you light up the room. Hey, these kids love
mm.
you. I mean, even
But
talk about Landon, who
hey,
just
Landon.
shout out to Landon. Um, Met that guy at the first time guest table,
Yeah, yeah.
met Jackie,
Mm.
and then they met you. That same night, I think they got their first Bibles.
They did, yeah.
They wanted you to highlight the scripture you talked
Yeah,
about.
people thought I was signing the Bible. I had to be like, guys, I'm not Jesus.
No, autographing the
No,
Bible.
but I highlighted it was Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the spirit. I highlighted where I was reading from that night when I preached. And so that's what I was showing them because they were so excited. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know besides I don't know if they told you this, they went out to the first time guest outside, not like ours. They went to a different
Mm.
one to go get a Bible because they didn't have one. And they were like closing up sort of thing and just got like the last ones, ran back, and then we had that interaction. So
Yeah.
literally like whole random, like we have to get our Bibles and then,
And now they're family.
oh, they're, of course they're
They're
family.
family.
Yeah, they are.
They're in our CG.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just that, and that's just one of the students that you've made an impact. I think about Quan too. And now
Oh,
that
cool.
you're in middle school, yeah, Quan's one of my guys.
He's awesome.
And then just people congregate to you because you've got that Jesus glow, like I mentioned on tonight.
Thank you.
Um, and at camp, at one weekend, I mean, there's just a difference in you
Mm,
that comes out of you. And I think people, especially students, can tell when someone's being genuinely caring and someone who's just, they needed a leader, so I signed up, you know?
yeah.
So I definitely appreciate that because, I love these kids and I
Yeah.
invest in them. And it's hard to be in a ministry when there's half-hearted people in it. And it's easy to do ministry with people that are in it like you, like taking the kids to SeaWorld, like
That was awesome.
that. I know I could call you up and be like, hey, what do you think about planning a Top Cup trip with some of the guys? Like,
I love golf.
I couldn't ask someone I can't call someone else and say, hey,
Mm.
they're like, nah, I work. You know what I mean? Because it's the investment. But yeah, man, I'm so grateful for you to serving with you. It sucks that you're in middle school now, but
No, I love middle school.
I
I
remember
love both. I love both.
when you told me you were going to middle school,
This broke his heart. I saw it. I saw his eyes.
he was like, you don't know yet. And I was
He
like,
lost his Jesus glow
what?
right after that.
But we were still in the same CG. Shout out to the
Always,
Pollard
always
CG.
go
The
Pollards.
Pollards are amazing.
I think though you bring up something that I think should also be highlighted though is I think a lot of people have big misconceptions on what ministry looks like. Like speaking on the stage, you hear like I've heard it from people, I didn't believe it. Probably it's like 5%, if not less, of what you're actually doing in the week and what you prepare and all of that. And most of ministry is simply loving people, which I know sounds so simplistic, but it really is. Do you love people? And do you love the people that you work with? Do you love the people that you get to care for? And loving people isn't just the ways that you think love is, it's the way their needs need to be met. And so loving someone doesn't look the same as loving another person. Loving one student might look completely different than another one. And so what it really I think comes down to is one, you've got to see people for people. Every single person, as we believe in Genesis 1:27, image bearers, that we've all been made in the image of God, that every person is a unique, different view of God's creativity. And they are all uniquely representing who God is, which means you need to then learn how to uniquely care for these people. And so I think a lot of times we see the stage, or we see the pulpit, or we see people who are leading and capacities that we see leaders be, but that isn't always leadership, and that also isn't always everyone's gift. You're not. I need people to hear too. You're not a bad leader if you haven't gotten taking your students to Six Flags. Like that's
Right,
okay.
right,
That's
exactly.
okay. Leadership looks so different, and I think oftentimes we view loving people as the ones who spend quality time, and then people who are in leadership need to be administrative and all that. You can
Yes,
be a very loving person and meet someone's needs administratively.
yes.
That there are people who are gifted at so organizational, not me,
Not me
so
either.
put together that they meet and know, oh, hey, like this person's birthday is on this day, and so we should give them these thoughts. Like ways to care for people doesn't always have to look like my giftings or
Your
David's
gift.
giftings or different. Everyone, I've seen people be loved in so many different unique ways. Sometimes type A people are loved in different ways than other people. Like extroverts are loved in a different way than introverts. So I think oftentimes we look at the extroverted, very big quality time gestures, and then we almost put those on the pedestal of
Hmm.
that's what leadership and caring
Yeah.
for people looks like. When I can think of probably 10 to 15 students who would be like, that sounds like my nightmare of quality time and going to ride roller coasters. So I think it all comes down to, as well as, do you just
Yeah.
care about the person and that person's needs, who they are as people? One of my favorite people at MSM is one of the girls who's reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Just check in, like, hey, what's the chapter? How's it going? And it might just be such a simple interaction, but like she's spending that time to go read and to go be by herself. She doesn't need to be brought into the goggleball pit, and that's okay. Like that's okay. So I think finding people's needs, finding people's desires and wants. If you ask anyone what their favorite things are, they'll love to tell you. It doesn't matter what kind of person you
Yeah.
are. And so I think getting to truly know people, loving the unique things about them, that's the character of God. And so for me, I believe that's been something that's been shepherded into me, that's been something that's been built into me. And that wiring may not be why you love people. So actually a better question I think to ask yourself is, what is it about people do you love? Then care for that. I love seeing people learn how to organize their calendars, help people then administratively, and learn to love people in a way that harnesses your organizational skills. So I don't think leadership, or good leadership, has to be so focused on what you do. I
Right.
think good leadership is transformational, period.
It's a body. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're planning it, we talk about camp coming up.
Mm.
There's some planning. I'm not
Oh, there
doing
better
any
be.
of that. I will
There
show
better
up
be.
and I would love these kids, but you ask me in a planning thing, yeah, I'm gonna pass.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the worst thing you can do isn't just try to be another body part. It's then deprive the whole body of the church from
Yeah.
you. Like there's a reason you're wired. I think the worst thing you could do is try to be Aidan. The worst thing you could do is try to be David. Like the best thing you can do is be who God has made you
Yeah.
to be, which is why I think the enemy attacks identity as hard as he can. Because the one thing the enemy
That's
wants
good.
isn't just to hurt you, he's trying to hurt God. And God loves you, and he loves how you've been wired and how you've been made. And so the best thing he can do is try to keep you from being who God's made you to be, because that doesn't just hurt you, it hurts God. And so think about these things, the insecurities, or the times that you don't feel like enough. Man, you're not just hurting your heart, and you're not just missing out on something. God has designed you. He's fashioned you. He's formed you. It's Psalm 139. And so the best thing you can do is simply be who God's made you to be,
Yeah.
because that brings him joy. He loves it. It's You're the clay pot he's taken the time to form.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you could do is then think the pot's ugly and that it's not how it's supposed to be made, or this, and this. When in reality, God is like, I've fashioned you and you are the most beautiful thing I've made. And that's how he sees you. So if you can live with that identity or that mindset, for me, then having that understanding for myself, it's changed the way I see every student, every person,
Yeah.
because then I want them to see they're the best clay pot that God has ever
That's so
made.
good.
And if you can make every person I think see that, or at least from my heart, if I can just do one thing on this earth, it would be just to leave people seeing themselves the way that God sees them. And I think that view of yourself is what leads to the body becoming the way that it's designed to be. Every person, every place.
Every person, every place. That's amazing. Aidan Price, everybody. Now you know why I love this guy so much. So,
Bro.
really quick,
Yeah.
I did text some students
Uh-oh.
and asked
Uh-oh.
to submit some
Oh,
questions.
no.
And I'm gonna pull those up real quick.
Oh, gosh.
I know, answering high
Oh,
school
gosh.
questions.
You would be shocked the things they ask you to your face,
Yeah,
point blank.
not even embarrassed.
Mm-mm.
So that just goes to show you that I'll say this is the moment I mentioned you being on the show, they
Mm.
reached out right away. Like they love you, they love to hear from you, and you're everybody's big brother.
You're so
Even though I'm
precious.
older than you, and
You
you're
might be
the older
older, but
brother.
hey,
Actually,
hey,
oh, that's right. We
hey,
gotta
same shoes,
oh,
same shoes.
twinsies.
Yeah, we are.
I want to say
Ignore how
this.
my pants don't fit me. That's
So
my
tall.
problem.
I do want to say on the record
Oh, no.
that I think I may have told you. I don't remember if I did or not. But Aiden is so encouraging to not only students but to and anybody around you. And I can't remember the last meeting that we had. Is that Pastor Kayla? I think it might have been for the kickoff of CG groups for the
Mm.
new semester.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had written everybody a letter, and I read yours. And I'm gonna say this because this is something I kind of not ashamed of, but I'm just kind of insecure about. Is the older I get, working with high school kids, I'm like, man, and especially like Quan, I'm like, if I ever become a father, I need Quan to be
Amen.
cloned
Amen.
and be my son.
100%.
Yeah, the guy is just a heart after Jesus. He loves to serve people, and people are just older people are drawn to him. And I'm like, man, that's just like be so cool to be a dad to have a
Mm.
son doing the same thing I do,
Mm.
serving in hospitality,
Yeah, yeah.
and then student ministry. But that's just something that I will say this on the record. This is me being vulnerable.
Oh, no.
Is my
Nowhere near
biggest
for it.
fear is not being able to have that opportunity
Mm.
to be a dad or anything like that. So you wrote something in that letter, and I took a picture of it, but it's so far down, and I don't want to look for it. But the thing that you said, um, you've become a best friend to me, or a brother to you, and a father to many,
Mm.
and that hit me so hard when I read that, because I'm like, man, if I never physically have a son my own, I know that I can, you know, have the opportunity to say, man, I was able to minister to so many kids at CBC or midweek.
Yeah.
That little sentence spoke to me so much. It was such an encouragement. And I'd never told you that. Like I hadn't told
Mm-mm.
anybody that. I've never told anybody. I never told a soul. Now everybody's listening to this is gonna know that they're like, oh, David needs to get married and have kids.
Take your time, Dad.
That's I'm taking my time, trust me. But that I just want to say thank you. Like I really
Yeah,
do
no,
think
of
that
course,
God is
David.
using you in so many ways that you don't even know, bro. Like we know we're
Thank
going to
you.
when we pull up at church, when I pull up on Sundays to work in hospitality or in we call it what's it called? Campus host.
Yeah.
And when I pull up on Wednesdays for student ministry, like I'm going to serve
Hmm.
and I'm going to hopefully minister to someone, something with you. But you writing a letter or whatever just doesn't like God's using you in ways without you even knowing. And to me personally, and I'm so thankful for getting to know
Thank you,
you.
David.
So let's get to these
This is
questions.
incredible. This made me cry. Gosh.
Should we cue this
The Jeopardy music or what?
first question?
Uh-huh. Let's hear it.
It says, ask him about the last instance in your life where you look back and clearly see, wow, that's God. I think any mind blowing God moments are always awesome to hear about.
I mean, how much time you got? I could spend another 4 hours. But let me think. I think we mentioned them. Jackie and Landon come to my mind. There are a million God moments, even just recently, that have happened. I think to highlight them for a second, I had struggled with so much. This was my first sermon I gave last year. It was the first sermon I gave last year. First sermon I'd given in 8 months. Then I'd spent, in my mind, 8 months is forever. So I just spent all this time not preaching, not speaking, and so nervous that man, the gift that I had, that I lost it, that who I was wasn't good enough, that what I was going to say wasn't good enough, no one was going to get it, no one was going to like it. I was so concerned about all of this. And then this is actually so cool. I'm going to talk about this. I There was a whole thing that happened at my last church, and that's something to unpack another day. But I ended up making a whole preaching calendar for our student ministry at my last church. And each month I had like a topic, I had why I'd chosen it for that month, and then what we were going to talk about. So for instance, it would be like, for Halloween, I was going to talk about, or I can't remember the exact, but it was like fear. And we'll talk about fear, and then we'll address this, and this passage. And the reason is because we want students to see the point of it. Yeah, yeah. So I did that for 12 months, like the whole 12 months. I got to start the year. It was the coolest thing ever. I got to start the year, and the topic was refocus. So, what does it look like to refocus your life on God? And that message was the first time I shared my testimony of what I'd been through. And my roommate, who's like led me to Christ, got to hear it. Like he
Wow.
got to come and sit with our students and sit through the whole message. Sweetest thing after, he told me how much that had impacted him and all that. And I remember that night so vividly. That was the first time I just spoke and refocused and realized I could lose everything in my life. Like I lost a lot at that point, and I was like, I could lose everything and have God and have everything. And that hit me because I refocused. Then I didn't even realize the next month was on relationships or some stuff here and there, and that ended up applying to me. And I'm here in the kitchen now in October, and I'm looking over what I'm gonna say and what I'm gonna talk about. And I look at this preaching calendar. I'll say God spoke to me because He truly did. Was like, go look at your preaching calendar. Every month, the topic, the theme was the lesson God had taught me that year, that month, that topic, that theme. And even some of the verses were ones I had not thought of this calendar since January and February, put it away. And it was things that just I couldn't explain it, like verses that all of a sudden became prominent to me for no reason. And we're just like, wow, like this. And each month, up until the point where my topic for this was gifts. It was the gifts of the Spirit. And I was so nervous about it. I just didn't feel qualified to
Yeah.
preach it. I'm born in December. The month of December was about the gifts of the Spirit. And just the moment I saw that was almost just God saying, I made you for this. Like I made you for this. And so after that, I also realized too, I'm no less of a student than anyone else in that room. My illustration I was going to use at the beginning was completely different. I rewrote it that night and I told my story. I told my story of struggling with anxiety and depression, and how me having my gifts was the biggest burden I'd ever experienced because I hated having them. I didn't want them. It meant they came with responsibility, and I hated the responsibility that came with being able to influence people, being able to speak, being able to, I hated it. I ran from it. It's what, like, I literally ran from it. And so here I am now giving a sermon about gifts and the gift that you are to God and the gift that you are to us and the way that God has fashioned you and created you. And everything about that sermon, I gave credit to 50 people. You're one of them. 50 people wrote that sermon. Like I was barely a part. I barely spoke it up there. Like it was so many people coming together, encouraging me and reminding me, no, God made you for this. And so when I got up there and I spoke, and I got to rewatch it again recently, I was like, I wrote 5 things I said. Like the rest of that, I don't even remember saying. I don't remember going into these topics or these things. And that whole message, one, opened my eyes to the way that God can speak to us and through us, but it also opened my eyes to the power of the gospel. I shared that and I saw 10 hands go up at the end
Yeah.
of the night that gave their life to Christ, and 2 of them were Jackie and
Yeah.
Landon. And I had a, by the way, I don't know if this is good to admit, I had a way to go if no one raised their hand because I was so worried. I was like, this will be so awkward. And I was panicked and stressed. And then my one prayer of the night had been, God, like, surprise me, do something. And then here I am about to, like, okay. And then 10 hands shoot up. And I got to
Right.
look at every single one of them in the eyes and say that God loves you. You're a gift. You matter. And then my last prayer was over your schools and over feeling empowered. And I remember, again, having an out in case no one came up. Like I had outs. And the moment I went up there and I said, "Hey, if you just feel that God is is asking you to go into your school to change the. As I'm talking, kids are getting up from their seat, and the whole front of the stage. I don't even know if you could see it in the video. The whole front of the stage is filled, like students from my right end to the left, just completely circled, and I'm hand over praying over each one that God would bless them and continue to show through them. And that night, like, it didn't just change my life, it changed the way I ministered, because I never wrote an out after that. And I never had an out, because every time I've gone up, and this isn't some sort of pride thing, this is just my belief, and I'm feeling like fired up speaking this. The word in Isaiah will not return void. My middle name is Samuel. So my name, even Aidan, my name means fiery messenger of God.
Wow.
And so my belief, especially with what I've seen, is I'm going to go up, and first in Jeremiah chapter 1, God's already put the words in my heart, and he's made my mouth, like he said to Moses. So I'm going to go up there, and the one thing I'm going to be is found faithful and be a faithful witness of Jesus. And if that's what I am, as I've seen in the Bible time and time again, if you're a faithful witness, people will be saved. They will experience and know Jesus.
Yep.
To this day, every time I have spoken or had any opportunity I've had, people have been saved. Not because of what I said or how I said it, but because the word will not return void.
Yeah.
And if you are willing to simply open your mouth and speak, God will move. God will do exactly what he's designed to do. All he's asking for is for people to speak. I think of one of the greatest ways to think of this is, man, it's almost like I'm an Aidan microphone. You're a David microphone. We have a Pastor Ed microphone.
Yeah.
We have a Pastor Mo microphone. So one, don't be somebody else's microphone.
Right.
God's already got it. But just be available for God to speak through it. Just be available. Just be turned on.
Yeah.
Just be ready to go at any moment for God to do something through you. And if that's your belief, man, I used to just not even believe that God could speak to me, let alone through me. And here I am now. And I can say with confidence, the reason I don't remember saying half that stuff is because God was in the room.
Yeah.
And God was moving, and he said things exactly that needed to hit Landon and Jackie's heart. They needed to hit 8 other students' hearts that night, simply because I opened my mouth. And so if you're willing to walk in confidence, walk in the gifts that God has given you, you're going to see not just the blessings and the fruit of the Spirit, but the gifts of the Spirit. And the greatest gift is people. And you will see people's lives changed simply because you were willing to be a gift to somebody. And I think if you're willing to walk in that, willing to walk through that, I've seen it for myself. I think that has been the most miraculous thing I've seen recently. And then there's a million other things I go here and there.
That's amazing. Great question. Great.
No, that's
answer.
phenomenal. Who asked that?
Aidan.
Aidan, great job. From one Aidan to another. Oh, phenomenal.
Let's see. Why do you?
Uh-oh.
This is from Aidan as well. He's your question guy.
He's
Loves it. It's an Aidan thing. Why do you work with kids and in his community? What led him to this? He put industry, but
So what kind of like led me to like youth ministry over?
Yes.
I think I came into youth ministry first, not kind of prepping. Like I said in my story, like my dad was like, "Hey, go help with this group." But I'm a product of youth ministry. Like I spent a lot of time in youth ministry, and I've had amazing youth ministers, and I've also had not amazing youth ministers. And so the one thing I remember was being in these places, being a pastor's kid, being known but not seen. And that has been the one thing I've fought. I've been like, if there's nothing else I can do, I'm going to make sure everyone in this room knows that they've been seen and that they're known. And so when I think that's just the heart that God's given me for people. But I think that's also what led me to, especially youth ministry, is because, man, one, you'll find middle school of all people, some honest individuals, but you'll also find some incredibly strong people that God is already forming and molding. There's a king in the Bible who was made king at 8 years old and a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like there are so many people that I think get looked down upon, like it says in Timothy, because of their age. But that isn't the purpose. That isn't the heart behind it. God can speak to anyone at any point, any age. And so I've loved just specifically youth. One because of Aidan, you're awesome. But so many of these students, some of these people, just like, man, there's a level of honesty and a seeking of knowledge, a just hunger for the truth. One, I think Gen Z is the most hungry for the truth, like truth generation I've ever seen. and of course I'm a young guy, but just genuinely seeking and hoping to know, man, what is truth? Like, don't cut it. Like, tell me. And then you see them do something with it. And that's what's so inspiring to me is, man, they get me encouraged and they get me fired up. And if I can take care of this next generation, if I can help steward this, I'm already taking care of the church tomorrow. Like the church today is them.
Yeah.
And the
that's
church
so
today
true.
is us. And so if I can make sure that the church of tomorrow is taken care of, I've invested in the kingdom. And if you're investing in the kingdom, it's always going to return. Always. And so that I think for me I think of the verses too as well, like the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Like no one wants to go into a middle school ministry, not all the time. And not everybody wants to go into high school ministry and do it. And I think that's just the gifting that God's given me is just, man, they're special. And they know they're special, but they're special.
Oh yeah, they are. Much love to them.
It's a
I have.
gorgeous question.
I want to ask you the one I kind of gave you a heads up earlier about it.
Uh-oh.
This is from Travis.
Oh, I love you, Travis.
yes, me
No,
too.
hit me with it. Hit me with it.
He asked, "How do you stay focused on the right things when dating?"
Oh,
Dun dun dun.
as someone who's often focused on the wrong things,
It's a tough one.
I think it's a tough one. And so also, I'm asking for grace as someone who is not married and someone who's not currently in a relationship. But I can tell you one from some things I've done in the past. I think there's something that Pastor Nick says that completely changed my view of dating. And a successful relationship is not one that ends in marriage. It's one that honors God and honors each other. So if your heart and your focus is to honor God and honor each other in the relationship, that means you can end in a breakup and it still be fine. And it not just be fine.
Yeah.
You've taken care of and stewarded someone that God has entrusted you with. And I think we can be really, really lenient in some areas of dating and then really strong where we preach abstinence and don't make any choices in being sexually immoral. Important.
Very.
However, we then can almost become lenient in the sense of like, okay, but this is a person's not just daughter and not just sister or a family member, but this is in the same way we talk about, this is one of God's most valuable prized possessions. And now you are in a relationship with this person, which means you need to steward that. You need to take care of that. You need to honor her. You need to uplift her. And as someone who has failed at that constantly, often, like bad, I can tell you if you do those things, if you focus on those things, I believe God's going to reward that. And it may not be in marriage, because let's be real, marriage is not the finish line, it's the starting line. Like
Right.
now it's on. Now this is serious. So if you can learn how to take care of someone's soul and how to tend to them in a way that doesn't put the weight of this is not your spouse yet. So don't put the weight of marriage on something that is only meant to hold dating. But if you can learn how to take care of that person, tend to them, shepherd their soul now, I think you'll then learn how to focus on the right things in dating. And man, sometimes the mistakes are inevitable. And sometimes you're going to cross lines. Sometimes things aren't going to work out the way that you did, which is why we talk about community groups. It's why we talk about spending time with each other and having accountability partners and reaching out, is because you're not meant to do life alone. And just because you have this other person who you're inviting into your life does not mean everyone else now is disqualified. Like they should add to your life, not take from it. And so if you're able to include others and to, man, hey, genuinely ask for your family's opinion or friend's opinion of, hey, is she making me a better person? Is he making me a better person? Am I looking more like Christ? Am I learning? It may look different and it may not, you may not always get great opinions or great views, but if you're willing to not live in an echo chamber with each other, I think a lot of the mistakes or a lot of the wounds that you might incur can be avoided. And so that would be my very,
good.
very like, sort of
Not dating question.
No, it's a great question. I think don't stop asking that question.
Yeah.
Because as you continue to be in the relationship, things will shift and things will change. And the whole point is learning to live as one with somebody. Like
Yeah.
that's a huge thing. That's a huge idea. It's a huge concept. And it's also very biblical, very God honoring. You're built and wired It's not good for man to be alone. That's the first thing God says about humanity. So it makes sense. It makes sense that you have these desires or these passions to be with
Yeah.
another person. But I think if you focus on the fact that God was the first in there, the first in these relationships, and then you allow that to seep into y'all's relationship, I think a lot of these things can be continually developed and grown and fostered in healthy ways. So,
Yeah. Very good.
do we have a special guest?
We do.
Who is it? Wait, no way. Aiden, is that you? Oh. Hey, Aiden. No problem. So, for those listening, that's my roommate Aiden. He's phenomenal. He's
other
incredible. The other
The
Aiden.
third Aidan.
There are two Aidens in student ministry as well. It's never confusing, and he's incredible.
He is incredible.
He is beyond incredible.
Incredible.
He'll come say something for sure.
From Omaha.
Amen. Not really.
North. Not.
Another 4 hours.
Yeah.
He doesn't mind.
No. I actually just wanted to say one thing to
Yeah,
answer that
sure, yeah.
is the best dating advice that I've ever gotten was from a leader from my previous church, and he said, when you focus on finding that person, I think that's where we get distracted.
Mm.
When we, as a Christian, we obviously want to focus on Jesus, right? He's our end goal in marriage or without marriage, whether you get married or dating or whatever. When you're running your race in life, you're gonna pass people up, and people are gonna pass you up, right? But at some point, there's gonna be that partner that you line up with, and you're gonna be on that same level, but you're both focused on Jesus, ending at in the same like space. That's how you find your partner. Because I think what happens is, I think a lot of Christians, especially in guys, like they just want to get married right away. Like they get saved and like, oh my God, I gotta find my wife. I'm looking for this girlfriend. I'm looking for this.
That missing rib.
Oh God.
Killed him.
Yeah. And I think that's not a bad thing, but I think it can be a dangerous thing as well, I think, because when you come to Christ and you start following Jesus, you get distracted and then you get hurt. And then all of a sudden now your relationship with Jesus is based on this person's hurt on you. So that would the only dating advice that I would give. That's probably the best thing. I'm not dating either, so can't tell you. But hey, just follow Jesus. And I think when you make Jesus your end goal, when you make Jesus your number one thing, everything else will follow.
Yeah.
Even a life partner.
I think too, even with that as well, is I think I've heard this statement thrown around. And so please, if you disagree, like please feel free to say something. This is just from what I've gathered. So beware, I'm giving a little like trigger warning here, okay? I have heard people misuse and misquote the term equally unyoked in a way that makes me like angry at times. Because the description of unequally yoked is this idea that you are unequally yoked in the sense of someone is a believer and someone is not.
Yeah.
Where you are in your spiritual journey and spiritual walk is not what that verse is referring to. And in fact, when oxen would be yoked, the stronger oxen would be yoked with a weaker oxen to lead. That's the whole reason why Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, is because the yoke on me is light because he's carrying the weight of it. And so when we're modeling Jesus dying for the church and the wives submit to your husbands, this concept of loving each other, it isn't just about, okay, well, I need to make sure then that my husband is 10 steps ahead of me spiritually. Because then if we apply the same logic where, okay, we need to be in the same space, one, you might not even challenge each other then if you're in the same spiritual walk. And shocker, no one's in the same stage spiritually. It might take you 2 years to get to where it took me 2 months and vice versa. The question is, do you both pursue God with all that you have? That's all that verse was referring to. And that's all that discussion really is about is man, are you pursuing Jesus? Okay, well then your yoke is the same yoke as the other person. Now there may be things about that person that you don't mesh with or that you don't go with, and that's okay. And you might be immature in areas that they totally fine. I think of my parents. My mom was a Christian for a month when she met my dad. My dad has been raised in the church and got saved when he was 4. So within a year, my mom was walking with Christ, met my dad, married, pastor's wife, and now trying to figure this all out. And I look at my dad, and my dad is beyond smart, knows a ton of Bible verses. You know him too, Mom. But But my mom also is so emotionally intelligent, and so those gifts, I see them come together. I would never say that they're unequally yoked because one of them had more
That's
time in
good.
Christianity or not. I would just think that they're both pushing each other in different ways.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other thing as well, is are you a good fit? Are you a good match? And I think too often people are using the Bible in a poor way and a poor
Yes.
understanding of that verse that I think actually keeps people from truly finding people that they would
That's so good.
do life well together with.
That is so good. And I think that happens a lot. I think the
I've heard it a
scripture
lot.
is used in a way because you can pick and choose.
Mhm.
You can take a scripture and make it say whatever you want it to say. That's why, for the young people that are listening, use discernment, get to know the word, read the Bible on your own, because then you'll be able to spot those. And that's not right. That's good. I've never thought of it like that before. That's really good.
I've just heard it, and I always think of my parents, and so I would hear those, and it was like, man, if my parents had followed that advice, they never would have gotten married. My dad never would have married my mom. Like, why would it? They're unequally
They're
yoked.
not equally yoked.
Right. But I think it's because of these times where we are, and it's just a poor, not even unequally yoked, but like where we're in different stages,
Yeah.
that shows it pushes growth. It's because Aiden and I are completely different in so many ways that I've seen myself become a better version of this Aiden.
Yes.
And so if you can learn, man, are we compatible, not unequally yoked? Are we compatible as people? I think that's a better question to ask yourself, and not this sort of scriptural like distancing between two people that I think is then a poor exegeting of what the scripture was even saying in the first place. Like, it's literally a sermon talking about being unequally yoked with unbelievers.
I think that a new podcast is birthed.
Oh yeah. Dude, I'm here all the time, bro. You just say when. You just say when, man.
That's all the questions I had. Let me see if anybody came through.
If you got, I'd love to anything. I'm here. Come on in.
And
Come on in.
the Aidens.
Look at this.
We've
Look
got
at this.
Aiden number 2 cameo.
Aiden couch.
Aiden.
You can just lean over if you need to.
They can probably hear me. I think
It's
they're all right.
very directional.
Yeah, there we go. Come on.
What's up? Introduce yourself.
Hey, it's an honor, sir, to be on this podcast. No, man, my name's Aidan Lindley. I think y'all were talking about me earlier when I went upstairs. But
Yeah.
yes, I work with the high school ministry at CBC, and it's an absolute blessing.
Aiden took Aiden away from high school.
Yeah.
But we love Aiden. I'm so grateful for you as well, bro. I'm glad that you.
It really is an iconic duo, the Aidens.
It really
Aidan
is.
and Aiden. We got middle school and high school covered.
That's crazy. I remember when it was a Sunday morning and I was with some friends of mine, and I was gonna ask you to take a picture. And you're like, "Hey, you're gonna meet the new MTI resident," and I was like, "Sure." And then you were like, "His name was Aiden," and I was like, "Wait, what?" I was legit confused for a second. I'm like, "What's going on here?" And then literally, your name was Aiden.
It's crazy.
That's amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, if I could say anything as well about Aiden, I think genuinely there's just been something about getting to know him and getting to see him down here. I didn't know a lot about like his story. I'd kind of run into him here and there. We like loosely knew each other before this residency. But I will say we want to talk about like a miracle of God or God doing things. He brought, if for nobody else, he brought Aiden down here for me, like genuinely. And there's so many conversations we had, so many moments we had, even him coming back the time they did, brought back so much joy about ministry and so much joy about following Christ that I genuinely lost. I genuinely lost over the time of getting in the rhythm and trying to achieve and do these things. And so Aiden brought me back to I think the heart of God in so many ways and during so many times. Like, I can't commend him enough for it, but I also would just love to give him, like you said, on record. I would also just love like to let that be seen as well. Just there are so many people in so many spaces and so many times that, man, you may never hear of, may never know of, may never see, and I don't think that'll be the case for Aiden. But there are a lot of conversations that Aiden and I've had that will never be televised or recorded that have affected and changed who I am in so many positive ways. And so I just want to honor him and just give him that commendation, of course, because genuinely this is the duo right here. And God knew it. God knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I I appreciate that, man, so much. But what's actually really crazy is I was sitting next to Aidan when God called me to ministry. I had talked to you what twice,
Yeah.
twice before, and we were sitting next to each other in the service. That there was this moment where the Holy Spirit prompted Pastor Ed to say, "Someone in this room's called to ministry," and it was me. I knew it was me, and I was sitting right next to Aidan, and
That's crazy.
and he said, "Can this person please raise their hand?" And so I raised my hand, and afterwards he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, I knew you were gonna raise your hand. Yeah, I knew you were gonna
That's
raise your hand."
amazing.
That's crazy. And so, man, it really is just a blessing now to live with him and to not only learn from him, but to call him just a brother in Christ. And it's more than just working in ministry together. It's a friendship and it's a brotherhood, and it's things can get lost when you work in ministry together. It can be seen as just a job, or we're just ministry buddies, or things like that. But it really is. It's a friendship, and God's intentional with those. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that the friendships in my life that last are the ones that I really feel like God intentionally put there. So yeah, Aiden's amazing. Aiden's amazing.
Wow. That's just touching. No, that's awesome. Well, I want to ask. I'm actually gonna ask Aiden. The one that Aiden asked.
Oh.
Let's do. All right. The mind. Okay, here we go. About a time. It wants to know a time in your life where you can look back and clearly say, "Wow, that was God." Any mind blowing moment, like got mind blowing God moments in your life.
My
You were. That's just unquestionably God had His hand in that circumstance.
Yeah. So I'll just tell this story more fully, is being called to ministry.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely a lot of people who I've told about it, but they're all very, inner circle, friends back home, family, things like that. But now all sorts of people get to hear the story, and it is amazing. It truly was God. And so I for the longest time had kind of felt a little bit of a call to ministry. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't know what that looked like. And so this past summer I said, well, I need to get an internship. I need a job for after college. And so I took a finance internship with USAA here in San Antonio, and amazing company, amazing internship. And I just remember laying in bed, and I couldn't sleep at night, and I would stay up and think, and I really do think it was the Holy Spirit's just conviction of, can you go your whole life without preaching the gospel full time? And that's just what kept coming up in my head is, there's a lot of people, and this is kind of a sidebar, but I really do think we need more people out in corporate America who are strong Christians, because there is such a shortage. It can be a dark place. And but God was just saying to me, I don't think that's you. I think you need to be preaching the gospel. I think you need to be in full-time ministry. And so I was wrestling with God, and I was running from it. And I got to a point this summer where I got so frustrated, and I said, one of my thoughts that I had was, God, if you really want me to do ministry, Pastor Ed will say it off the stage, or something crazy will happen. But those were the exact words that came out of my mouth. I said, if God, if you really want me to go into ministry, I was fighting it. If you really want me to go into ministry, Pastor Ed will say it off the stage. And that was about July 11th, 12th, somewhere in there. July 25th, Pastor Ed is a guest speaker at Common Ground. And so I get there and I'm thinking, oh boy. But at this point, I'm still in denial. I'm convincing myself, oh, this doesn't mean anything. This isn't anything significant. It's just Pastor Ed. He gets up there and he says, I feel the Holy Spirit prompting me to change my sermon. I said, oh, that's interesting, but still doesn't mean anything, right? That's like strike two. One is Ed's there. Two is he's changing his message. He gets up there and he preaches Isaiah 6. And he ends with Isaiah 6:8, where it says, "Here am I, Lord, send me." And so my heart's just like pumping a little bit, and I'm thinking, oh, this is real interesting. And then there's this moment, and I kind of described this earlier, but Pastor Ed on stage says, there's someone in this room who has been called to ministry. They've had it spoken over their life. They have the skills for it, and they have been running from it and just haven't stepped out into it yet. And he just spoke over me my exact situation. And it was at that moment that I surrendered and I said, okay, God, like I can't run from it anymore. But I think that is the time that I have most just tangibly experienced God speaking to me. Yeah, what I would say was that. And now being down here, so I had to wait, 5-6 months to get down here. I went back and finished school, and now I'm just living in what God has for me, just the call, being able to live that out, and that's been really cool of, actually obeying finally, right? Maybe running from it, but finally obeying, and then seeing what he has for me has been just incredible. So that's what I would say.
That's incredible. Yeah. For you that don't attend CBC, MTI is a program. You probably can explain a little bit better than I can, but there are some in student ministry, there's some in the worship team, there's some in college, there's some in like global, and they strategically are placed to assist the ministry
Mm-hmm.
and equip you guys for essentially what is full-time ministry. I know you guys are in full-time ministry now, but like it's still kind of like you're getting that hands-on experience. And these guys blow the most trained people out of the water. I mean, just these two right here. And then even our worship leaders like Adelie, Sarah, they just, I mean, it's like, oh, they're just not just, but like they're still in a training season.
Yeah, I mean, even just speaking from high school, Adelie, one of our residents, leads high school
Yep.
worship,
Yep.
and you would never guess she's a resident. You would never
Yeah.
guess that she's not full time. And you could say that about, I think, just about any of the residents. We truly have an incredible group.
But we've gone on for an hour and 22 minutes. And we didn't even talk about too much.
I could do it all night. I can do it all night.
Maybe there's gonna be a part 2.
I would not be
continued.
mad. Oh no,
I wouldn't be mad.
Definitely.
That was good to hear you again.
Yeah. Wait, what?
I couldn't hear you while I was over here. Like, in my ears like this. So,
man,
I missed it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your story and
dude,
and
Aidan featuring Aidan.
Stay here till we're done.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Aidan featuring Aidan.
This is like a double portion.
Completely unplanned.
Naughty. Yeah, I thought we would be done.
But, the people need to hear it.
The people are, and we'll have you on, bro. I'll have you.
Come on.
I would love to hear your story too, because I know you had said that you and I spoke a little bit when we went to go see some of the kids play, Jackson, Hudson, play basketball. And I had asked you like how you found CBC, and you said you came down for the internship at USAA, and that you were attending CBC. That you looked it up for church you came into, and here you are. I would love to hear that story and just hear a little bit about you too. So hey, we'll have a series of MTI residencies.
So it's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. So send the email out to your team.
You're gonna buy some more mics, bro. Really,
I know, right? We're gonna take a love offering on this GoFundMe.
A little offering.
I know. I don't make money
pass
off
the
of this
bucket
yet,
out in the
so,
comment section.
like I said, like and subscribe so I can quit my job and make money off
Dude,
it. But any last things you want to say? I do ask anybody who's on the show to pray us out. So
yeah,
I'm gonna share something really quickly and then end us out in prayer.
Yeah. I think for anyone listening, I think it's no coincidence these were the topics that we talked about, or that this is what we went over. And I think for the person who, very much like Aidan, was in the room and is like, God, if you're real, or God, speak to me, I think this episode was for you. Whoever that was, in any way, that this conversation was meant to happen, because God is speaking to you. God sees you. God loves you. And so I will, of course, pray over everybody. But my prayer always for anybody is just that you would know that God has seen you, that you are known by him, and that he loves you, that you are his most valuable possession. And so for any person who is out there who's just wondering, or maybe hoping that God exists, or that, man, I just hope God sees, it's no coincidence you clicked on this video. It's no coincidence you're listening to this. It's no coincidence that this is the moment that we've gotten to. And so I just pray for any person who is out there that you would just receive this and know that God sees you and he loves you. So if you could, if wherever you're at, if it's safe, close your eyes, bow your heads, and we'll pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this opportunity to just talk, and to simply just talk about you, God. You are such a good God. And I know this opportunity even to speak freely is not it's not available everywhere in this world, God. And so I just pray that we never take these moments for granted. I pray that we would just appreciate your goodness, appreciate your faithfulness. God, I pray that our stories would do nothing but point to your glory, God. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for loving us the way that you do. And I pray that every person who sees this, hears this, or knows you, God, would they just know that you love them, that they're loved, that you're seeking them, that you want them to know and see you in everything that you do. So God, I pray that you would just bless them, that you would just allow them to know that you are who you are. Would you allow them to see your face? Would it shine upon them, God? I pray that you continue to bless them, bless their children and their children's children, God. So I just pray that you would just take care of everyone who listens to this and allow them to know they are seen and loved. I pray all this in your name. Amen.
That's a wrap. Live.
Sounds good to me.
LMTI.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
No, thank you.